great pleasure to be here. Real great honour to be standing up and presenting as well. A great honour to be a sponsor as well. The last couple of days have been awesome educationally for me personally, and I know for the team that I brought across. The sessions from Shabani and Adrian on Tuesday were really enlightening and thought-provoking for me, so I'm taking a lot out of the conference, which I hadn't expected, so I'm very glad to be here. Also very glad to have had the opportunity to see a different perspective, be a fly on the wall, listen to all of the input from the consultant community. I'll be taking a lot back to my job and my work as a result of that. Initially, I didn't have an introduction to Stoddart because we're pretty well known in Australia, but those in the room probably don't know us. We were established in 1959. The business was established by my grandfather, Tom. I'm a third generation family member. We're still family owned. Metal fabrication is at our heart. We are Australia-wide and also present in New Zealand and covering up into the Pacific as well as a result of that. We employ over 450 people in Australia, and we're a manufacturer and a distributor of many market-leading brands in the FSE realm. In addition to the food service equipment, which covers everything from hand basins through to all the way through to horizontal cooking, dishwashing, ovens, right the way through to ventilation. We're one of the only trusted partners of Halton worldwide to license and design and manufacture their technology, and we do that for Australia and New Zealand. I've got a colleague here, Marcel Heinen. He heads up our ventilation business, and he's very familiar talking on a day-to-day basis with the consultants in the region. And also Spiro Savelis. Spiro heads up our consultant relations throughout the country. We're also a contractor on major projects. We've actually undertaken recently the largest food service equipment contract in Australia's history. It was the Crown Casino in Sydney, a CKP job, and an outcome that we're very, very proud of. An iconic job, and I'd encourage you, if you're ever in Sydney, to visit and have a look. My original topic for discussion today was to talk about sustainability of food service equipment itself. I figured I'd be preaching to the converted. Many of you have a much broader perspective than I do of what's out there in the industry. I didn't want to talk about my own brands so much, so I changed the topic, and what I wanted to talk to you about was not necessarily product, but the process that's used to manufacture and distribute our products, and what our industry can do and is doing to improve our environmental footprint. Most people, when they think of manufacturing, the international sort of symbol for manufacturing is this one here. Rather ugly looking building with a smokestack and a puff of smoke coming out the top. And I'm sure a lot of you would recognise that symbol and relate it to manufacturing. You kind of know you've got an image problem when that's you. Manufacturing is perceived as a dirty industry, but not all manufacturing is dirty. I'm quite proud to say that food service equipment manufacturing is not a dirty industry. Most of our material inputs, predominantly stainless steel, come from a fully recyclable source. They're fully recyclable. The scrap and also end of life is always and most often put back into recycled to get turned into a new product. I'm really proud of that. There's not a lot of noxious byproducts as part of our process, which is really good. Our process doesn't use a lot of water, and much of our water needs can be captured and stored for our own use. Our main factory in Karawatha in Brisbane When we built it, we buried water tanks that capture water from the roof, and that's used for a lot of the toilets and ablution facilities that happen from a day-to-day basis, and that's probably our main water usage, the people on site. Our main other inputs are labour and electricity. So, what more can be done to improve? Well, there's quite a lot, actually. So how can manufacturing companies improve their input? They can embrace and invest in new technology that's more efficient, more energy efficient. We can automate. We are automating. Really interesting discussion on how it related to food service. It's manufacturing's not that different to the kitchen. We have a recipe, we have a process, and we have ingredients. We can work on automating those things in a manufacturing process. More so, we can actively search to make improvements. I'm not a starry-eyed idealist. I'm a 52-year-old businessman with a finance background running a company that's older than myself. That doesn't mean that I don't have a conscience, a set of morals or a set of ethics. We spoke about values earlier in the week, and embedded in our company values key elements of continuous improvement, waste reduction, and also zero harm. Zero harm first emerged as zero harm to our employees, zero harm to users of our products. More recently, zero harm to our environment that we operate in has been added to that. If you know that what you're doing is wasteful, is causing harm, could be improved, then you have an obligation to change it. What I've found, or what we've found, is that most of the time these choices actually improve your bottom line. Now, I can't speak so much for others, but I can speak about our own journey over the last 10 years. Stoddart voluntarily began its ISO environmental accreditation, ISO 14001 environmental accreditation in 2019. What this does is it forces you to look at your inputs and look at your waste. It's first up to measure, report, and then improve. This initiative, it raised the topic to the boardroom level. It made it a permanent agenda item at our board meetings, and forced us to look critically at our footprint. Prior to that, we've been very familiar with using lean manufacture techniques to improve our process and remove waste out of our process. We thought we were pretty lean the way that we operated. But I can't really say that before 2019 sustainability was part of our focus. So ISO accreditation really helped us do that. And shine a light, look under the hood, go looking for those improvements. So part of that was measuring our carbon footprint, and in recent times there's been a number of web-based services that have been launched to assist companies like ours to measure and report on their carbon footprints. The carbon footprint here is our site, our primary site at Karawatha in Brisbane, from 2019. Whilst we're not forced to do this by law, it's voluntary, and I've acknowledged Tim's comment yesterday. Does it take legislation to force people to change? This was voluntary for us. I think that legislation will come, and we'll have to start to report on this. It pays to get ahead of the game. The services use an internationally recognised standard to convert various usages into tonnes of CO2, and allows us to do apples for apples benchmarking, and it also allows us to monitor our improvements as we take actions throughout the course of time. Okay, we use a service called Climate Clever, and that's the web platform that we use. Others looking for a good place to start, particularly the allied members in the room, they would do well to watch a recording of the latest NAFIS webinar. was done about 3 weeks ago, and it sought to introduce our industry, our Australian industry and New Zealand industry, to environmental governance methodologies and best practices. So hit Jen up, she'll send you a link to that webinar, and it is a good place to start. So looking at our footprint, not surprisingly, electricity is well up there, and a lot of the electricity that's sourced in Australia is from fossil fuels. So the conversion from kilowatts usage to carbon is quite high. And I'd contrast that to Otto's plant in Christchurch using hydro with renewables. Whilst your electricity carbon footprint might not be that high, I think there's still quite a lot of opportunities for Scope to introduce renewables at your factory and at your source, and I'll go into that a bit in a second. So 89% of our footprint comes from electricity usage. 6.5% comes from waste, 3% from LPG usage. This is 2019 numbers, and then the balance is rounded out with transport, paper and water, quite low. The carbon footprint is also broken down into scopes. The scopes are, Scope 1 is carbon, CO2 that you generate directly yourself. We have a fairly low footprint in Scope 1, and it largely comes from our LPG or gas usage on site for our kitchens, for our canteen, but also for forklift fuel. Okay, Scope 2 is indirect carbon generation through energy usage, and Scope 3 is other indirect sources, so both upstream and downstream. You've got transport, you've got all sorts of other things that are quite hard to measure, but Scope 3, we're forced to try and measure those as well. All right, so that footprint is the footprint of the Karawatha site. The site is the site in the centre here. It's located in Brisbane, Queensland, the Sunshine State, as they call it, in Queensland. The building has, or the site has a 50,000 square metre area, 25,000 square metre building, 21 of factory, 4,000 of office. Over 400 employees attend the site every day, and the site operates 24 hours per day, 5 days per week. It is a highly energy intensive site. Even though we don't heat or cool the factory, we're in a fairly mild climate. It's a big difference between us and Europe. We don't have to condition the air that we work in for the factory. The office is a bit of a different story, especially in summer. Alongside with that large site and energy intensity actually comes a lot of opportunity to reduce your carbon footprint. So from 2019 and that analysis, what did we start to pick first? One of the most obvious choices to us was solar. In 2021, we implemented a solar investment. This site was only built in 2013, by the way, so only 10 years old. And the payback on solar at that time didn't stack up. It was took about 15 years, and we didn't proceed at the time that we built. By 2020, the formula, the equation started to change, particularly with increasing electricity costs and reducing costs of systems. We invested in an 850 kilowatt system, and you can see that on the installed on the roof of the office here, and then down the length of the factory. So that's that 850 kilowatt system cost $850,000. It's about 1,000 Australian dollars per kilowatt. It's reasonably good rule of thumb. At the time, it had an 8-year payback at the time of investment, and that's only improved since as electricity costs have gone up. We went ahead. That stacked up really well for us. It's a very solid return on capital. Same time, we also replaced halogens and fluoros, which 10 years ago were commonplace in building, with LEDs. We've also made very significant investments in automating machinery, both improving operational efficiencies, but also jumping to latest efficiency standards with that equipment. Over that period, we've also looked at our vehicle fleet. We've converted a lot of our sedans to hybrids, but as yet, a lot of our fleet is in trucks or small trucks, light trucks and utilities. That hasn't proceeded as yet because the technology isn't here. So with those investments that I was talking about with electricity, this gives you some idea of what has happened to the carbon footprint since 2018-2019. Okay, so 2018-19, we had a footprint, tonnes of carbon, about 2,300 generated by the site. That consistently went on throughout COVID and to 2020 at about 2,000 tonnes per year. We then invested in solar. We also made some of the investments in LEDs, but I think that predominantly the gain came from the solar investment. And you see that carbon footprint drop dramatically. From the peak in 2018, it's dropped by 1,100 tonnes, and which is about 49% of that site's footprint. Electricity is 89% of my footprint of the entire site. So that is really considerable. One investment pays itself off in 8 years and almost halved our carbon footprint. So off the back of that success, we've got warehouses in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth in addition. They're distribution warehouses, not manufacturing. And we have on our own sites in Sydney and Perth, we've installed solar with even more dramatic effect. In both of those sites, we're not operating 24 hours. The power's being generated as we use it, and we're almost carbon neutral on those sites, which is pretty impressive. The ISO accreditation also forced us to look at waste. Waste was about 6.5% of our footprint. We've looked at recycling more materials. We've looked at reducing our non-recyclable materials. We've looked at the new equipment that we've invested in improves our efficiency and utilisation of our raw material, so that we're putting less raw material into the scrap bin. And we've also become very focused on reducing our waste to landfill. So here the carbon footprint reducing or roughly bowling along, I can't really explain the 2019 number at the moment, but roughly bowling along at 300 tonnes per year. And with some of these changes and investments coming down, reducing by about 39%. So good gains there as well. I really like this slide. This is our LPG usage. So LPG is used to run our forklifts, or was used to run our forklifts, and we've converted a lot of that forklift fleet to electric. So similar to what you might do and what you might consider in a kitchen, we're doing that electrification process in our factory. We've done some electrification in our show kitchen and in our canteen kitchen. And one of the other key benefits with the new equipment that we've invested to cut and bend our metal is that we've automated our materials handling process. So our previously sheet metal was moved around in the factory by forklift. We now have we call it a central filing cabinet for sheet. You load sheet at one end, and then that filing cabinet moves the sheet around or in an automated fashion between cutting machinery and bending machinery. So we've eliminated a hell of a lot of forklift movement in the site. So that particular footprint, whilst it's not high in tonnes, From the peak, we've reduced it by 77 tonnes at 66%. And this cuts against the grain of the electricity usage that I was showing you before, because it's actually intensifying our electricity use. But we still managed to cut our electricity use through solar at the same time as intensifying it. Transport is a bit of a different story. We've been converting cars to hybrid for a number of years now. Electric vehicles aren't really well taken up in Australia yet. It's coming. We don't have a choice with a lot of our fleet, as I said before, is with utes and trucks, and we don't have a choice with that just at the moment. And we've actually seen an increase in our carbon footprint with cars and transport over time. So that is something for us to work on in the coming years as new technology starts to hit. All right, so we've halved our carbon footprint with electricity use at our primary site. But the carbon footprint there is still pretty significant, about 1,200 tonnes per year. What do we do next? How do we extend the gains in the future? We've already started investigating increasing the roof capacity. The picture that I showed you earlier, the main roof and the office roof is maxed out at the moment. There's only so much weight structurally, additional weight structurally that it'll take. So our next series of solar panels would go on the awnings around the outside of the building. The building itself's 200 metres long, 120 metres wide. So that actually would increase our solar generation by about 40% on top of what we currently have. That's great, but we don't need the power during the day when it's generated. We actually need it at night throughout the night shift. So we don't have, I think it was Paul you were talking about yesterday, it's frustrating when with solar at home you get nothing, you don't get a lot back from selling it back to the grid. We get very little back from selling our excess power generation to the grid. So it then leads us to what to do with the excess power. Well, we can consider investing in battery storage and further intensify our solar generation. That's great. Currently, there's quite a lot of uncertainty on life of that battery storage. It's quite a high capital cost as well, and the economics aren't quite stacking up for us at the moment. Although there are a few things that might turn us back to considering that. We've had a number of power interruptions over the last 5 years. Okay, losing 1 day of production at our place has a very significant cost. And you're sitting there waiting for the power to come back on. You don't know whether to send the 400 employees home for the day. You're sort of twiddling your thumbs. It might come back on, it might not come back on. After an hour, you end up giving up and sending everyone home. About 5 minutes later, it comes back on. But that's, Sod's law. And what could happen with investing in batteries, we could negate that. We could negate that interruption in power. We could also negate the fluctuations that happen during the day with our own power usage, where we have spikes, or our own power generation, where a cloud comes over and reduces the solar generation. So we're still putting the numbers together on battery storage. We've got the space to handle it and do it, and it is worth considering. Another potential technology worth considering is using vehicle-to-building technology. And this is something that is pretty exciting for the future for us. If not anything, an electric vehicle is a battery on wheels. Okay? If you've got 100 cars parked in your car park and they're electric vehicles, you've got 100 batteries sitting there that could be taking charge of excess power from the solar, but could also be feeding power back into the building as and when it needs it. So interesting technology, but not quite there yet, but could be in the future. That then might lead us to consider using the car park, creating covered car parks with solar panels on top. We already manufacture structures like this for covered walkways, for bus shelters, for transit centres in other areas of our business. So that could become worth considering in the future to try and extend these gains. What else is in it for us other than significantly reducing our carbon footprint? If an employee can come in and charge their car whilst they're sitting, whilst they're working, then increased staff satisfaction, increased staff retention, all of these other benefits start to come into play as well. So that's something for us to think about for the future. We spoke about waste. We've increased recycling. You can see here tonnes of recycling increasing from 120 tonnes per year up to 190 tonnes per year. So we're making sure that we're a lot more cognizant with the waste that's being generated on site, sorting that waste and recycling it. We're very focused on reducing our waste to landfill, and proud to see that that's come down from 280 down to about 213. And another area that we're working on is in packaging, and I know that Otto alluded to this as well with R&D. It's a key area where legislation is starting to be introduced, Tim, in Australia to reduce single-use plastics, reduce use of polystyrene and polyurethanes in packaging. And I wanted to move on to that as a really brief case study of what we've been doing with packaging. Okay, packaging is tricky. Obviously, you want your goods to arrive at the other end undamaged, but admittedly, a lot of packaging ends up in landfill. The industry is being forced, as I said, to consider this by legislation. Polystyrene has been an historic option, but we're being forced to phase that out. We'd already phased polystyrene out because it's very, very difficult to handle. It's big and bulky, and you've got to store it, and then you put it in the box. About 20 years ago, we moved to polyurethane foam fillers. So we generate the volume at the point of use. A plastic bag injected with polyurethane foam expands, and then that becomes your packaging. That's great, but it's very environmentally unfriendly. These are the foam fillers and foam corners that we've been using for the last 20 years, and I'm not proud of the fact that I've created several thousand, many thousands of these, and many thousands of them probably ended up in landfill. What I am proud of is that we're trying to make a change, and this movement to recyclable cardboard corners has just happened. It's been an initiative that was undertaken by my younger brother. He used his background in sheet metal, turning 2D shapes into 3D shapes, to come up with an idea to make a 3D corner, cardboard corner, to replace what's on the left. So we did that with our packaging supplier. They've actually submitted it to the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation for an award, an innovation award, which is pretty cool. You can see here using the expanded foam and then using the corners to try and space the equipment from the edge of the box. All of that cardboard is recyclable at the other end, should go in a recycle bin, get reused again. We've also got void filling options. We've recently bought a machine that takes our incoming cardboard waste. Instead of us recycling that, we're reusing it. It turns it into, it's basically a shredding machine, but it turns it into void filling for packaging. and we've also started using cardboard tape or paper tape instead of plastic tape, which means that you're not contaminating the cardboard that you'd like to see end up in recycling with more plastics. These changes save us $70,000 a year. And some days you just go to work and you just give yourself an uppercut. Why hadn't we done this sooner? Why did it take legislation for us to consider it? So whilst I'm not proud of where we come from, I'm really proud of where we're heading. The ISO accreditation that I talked about before, it's forcing us to look under the hood. It's forcing us to look for improvement and look for change. All right, so hopefully you can see that our industry is doing its bit, trying with sustainability. For us, the low-hanging fruit is not hard to find. You've really just got to look. More often than not, the changes make really good financial sense, and you can probably tell that appeals to me from my accounting background. There's still much that can be done to extend the gains. What I can say is that the methodology and the culture to improve is really well embedded in our organisation, and I think it's shared across the industry with the allied members as well. And I think even more is going to come as the technology advances and the capital costs come down. If I look at 10 years ago when we built our building to now, the improvements that we've made, those changes will just accelerate in the future. Okay, so thanks for listening, and I'm happy to take questions.